So I wrote this Epiphany story many years ago now, but I have always loved sharing it when I have the chance to share with a new congregation. It's a story that imagines what took place the night the three wise men first discovered the star that would lead them to the Christ child. And it goes like this. It started like any other night. Like every other night, the three old friends had shared in the observatory on the top of the hill. Their nightly routine was just beginning. Mel, the oldest of the three, rolled out the star charts on the old oak table in the center of the room. Bart fiddled with the instruments they would use to watch the skies, and the smell of cinnamon tea filled the room as Gary brought the teapot and 3 mugs to the table. The 3 wise star watchers took up their usual places, Mel and Bart scanning the heavens, reading the stars, watching for a sign, while Gary, the newest member of the group, recorded their observations in a well-worn leather journal. As the 3 watchers settled into their familiar routine, a comfortable stillness filled the room, broken only by the rustling of the star charts and the scratching of Gary's pen on the pages of his journal. It was Bart who saw it first, that star that would disrupt their comfortable, familiar routine and send the 3 friends on a long and winding journey. He almost missed it. It was a star in the eastern sky, winking just a bit brighter than the others. He checked the chart lying on the old oak table in the middle of the room, then looked back up at the skies in the east, then back at his chart, then back to the skies. He asked to see Gary's journal and flipped through the notes from the past several weeks. He chewed on his thumb, deep in thought, as he turned once more to the eastern sky. I think this is it. This is the star we have been waiting for. It's the star we have been watching for, Bart said to his friends. Mel and Gary looked up at the star that Bart pointed out, then down at the charts, then back at the star. I think you could be right, Mel mused thoughtfully. So now what? Gary asked, excited to be part of this momentous discovery. Should we write it on our chart? I think we have to follow it, Bart said, gazing up at the winking light in the east. This star is different. We can't just write it down and put it on the shelf. I think we have to see where it's leading us. What? Follow it? We are star watchers, not star followers, Gary said, his excitement fading a bit. Following it sounds scary. We could get lost. We could get out into the middle of the desert and the star could disappear, and then we would never get back here to our familiar and comfortable routines. Maybe we should just tell somebody else about the star, and then they could follow it instead. But Bart wasn't listening. He was already folding up the charts and gathering supplies for their journey. Gary turned to Mel, who was still gazing up at the star, while his hand rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Mel, Gary pleaded, you are not really considering this, are you? At your age? This journey could be long and difficult. I mean, this is a star, not a map. How will we know when to stop? We might just keep wandering around forever. Wouldn't it be easier to just stay here and drink our tea and stick to what we know works? Gary paused to take a breath, and Mel, still gazing at the star, placed his arm on the younger man's shoulder. Look at that star and tell me what you see, the old watcher said patiently. Gary opened his mouth to renew his protest and closed it again. He turned his gaze to the heavens, to the bright light of the star in the east. Gary looked up at the star, wondering what in the world his friends saw in it. But as he gazed into the heavens, curiosity began to wiggle in next to his fear. Wonder began to creep in next to his doubt. The longing to move began to overtake his desire to stay. A soft but persistent voice began to whisper in his ear, "Arise, shine, for your light has come." He saw a road stretch out before him, the light of the star leading the way to an unknown destination, but beckoning him to follow. He looked back at his friend who was still gazing at the star. "It still seems risky," the young watcher said. "Well, it is risky," the older watcher replied, looking at Gary now for the first time. "But perhaps ignoring this revelation, perhaps allowing our fear of the journey to triumph over the possibilities of the star, is even more risky. Perhaps these familiar surroundings and comfortable routines have caused us to stop watching and stop listening for the call of the Holy One. Perhaps our temptation is to ignore or doubt divine wisdom that appears in places we aren't looking or expecting, in the daily routines of life, in conversations with friends, in moments shared with family, in those dreams that keep interrupting our sleep. Perhaps the greatest risk is fooling ourselves into thinking that the Holy One has nothing new in store for us, that there will be no new stars to rise and beckon us on, that there will be no new roads for us to travel. But what happens when the star leads us into unfamiliar roads? Gary asked the old watcher as they began to gather a few things for the journey. Any trip worth taking will eventually lead you down unfamiliar roads, or roads you didn't expect to travel, Mel answered. Sometimes we're forced onto unfamiliar paths by changes in life. We get new jobs, we retired from old ones, our health changes, our family's needs change. Sometimes we end up on a new road without much choice at all. Sometimes we feel called to explore a new path or a new vision or a new possibility. The challenge is to find those holy possibilities that are present on any road that we might travel. It still sounds scary, Gary said, but he too began to pack the cinnamon tea and the other supplies for their journey. "Well," Mel answered, "the good news is that we aren't traveling alone. You have your old friends, Bart and Mel, to walk with you. And of course, the light of the star, the presence of the Holy One, will be with us throughout this adventure, through every surprising turn and new discovery, even when we have to turn around or ask for directions or just stop for a minute to get our bearings. The Spirit of the Holy One will go with us, leading us, calling us, waiting for us, and holding us. Just then, Bart stuck his head through the door. "Mel, can you wrap up this sermon so we can get going? The camels are ready, and if we leave now, we can still follow the star for a few hours before the sun comes up." So Mel picked up his bag and followed Bart outside. Gary lingered for a moment, remembering a few verses of poetry by his favorite poet, Anne Weems. Christmas comes every time we see God in other persons. The human and the holy meet in Bethlehem or in Times Square. For Christmas comes like a golden storm on its way to Jerusalem, determinedly, inevitably. Even now it comes, in the face of hatred and warring, no atrocity too terrible to stop it, no Herod strong enough, no hurt deep enough, no curse shocking enough, no disaster shattering enough. For someone on earth will see the star. Someone will hear the angel voices. Someone will run to Bethlehem, and someone will know peace and goodwill. The Christ will be born. So taking one last look at the old oak table in the center of the room, he turned to follow his friends outside and begin a new and holy adventure. Amen.